My mother is moving in. Deal with it or leave. The words hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest as I stood there in my boxers at 11:58 p.m. trying to fix the porch light that had been flickering for weeks. My wife Jennifer was on speakerphone in the kitchen, her voice carrying that particular tone she used when she'd already made up her mind about something. I'm David Marlen, and I fix things for a living. Plumbing, electrical, carpentry, you name it, I can repair it. What I couldn't fix, apparently, was my marriage to a woman who thought consultation was a four-letter word. David's just going to have to adjust, Jennifer continued to whoever was on the other end. This house is plenty big enough for all of us. Our house, I thought, gripping the screwdriver tighter. The house my grandfather left to me. The house where I've been busting my back for 8 years making improvements, while you complain about everything from the kitchen counters to the bathroom tiles. I climbed down from the ladder and walked inside, making just enough noise that Jennifer would know I was there. She didn't even flinch. "Mom, I have to go," she said into the phone. "David just came in." She hung up and turned to face me, her expression already set in that familiar mask of cold determination. Jennifer worked as a paralegal at Morrison & Associates downtown, and she'd perfected the art of looking right through people when they became inconvenient. "So," I said, setting my tools on the counter, "your mother's moving in." "That's right." Jennifer crossed her arms. "She lost her apartment, and she needs somewhere to stay while she gets back on her feet. And you decided this without talking to me. I'm talking to you now." I stared at her for a long moment. Jennifer was still beautiful at 34, with the kind of sharp features that looked great in the professional headshots she used for the law firm's website. But lately, looking at her felt like staring at a stranger wearing my wife's face. "When?" I asked. "Tomorrow." "Tomorrow." I repeated the word like I was testing its weight. "And how long is this arrangement supposed to last?" Jennifer shrugged. "As long as it takes." That's when I knew. Not suspected, not wondered, knew. This wasn't about her mother needing help. This was about something else entirely. Jennifer had been different for months now. Late nights at the office, new clothes, a sudden interest in yoga classes and self-care. The kind of changes that, in my line of work, usually meant someone was preparing to make a major renovation. "I see," I said. "Do you have a problem with that?" "Where do I even start?" "Jennifer, your mother and I don't exactly get along." "That's your problem, not hers." Vanna had made it clear from day one that she thought her daughter had married beneath her station. Never mind that I owned this house outright, ran a successful contracting business, and had never once failed to provide for Jennifer. In Vanna's eyes, I was just some blue-collar guy who got lucky. "Maybe we should discuss this when we're both thinking more clearly," I suggested. "There's nothing to discuss. She's moving in tomorrow, and that's final." Jennifer walked past me toward the stairs, then paused. "Oh, and David? You might want to think about being more welcoming this time. Mom's been through a lot lately." I watched her disappear upstairs, then stood there in my kitchen, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of our bedroom door closing with more force than necessary. "Deal with it or leave," she'd said on the phone. I'd spent 8 years dealing with a lot of things. Jennifer's mood swings, her mother's passive-aggressive comments during holiday dinners, the way Jennifer had slowly stopped asking my opinion about anything important, from vacation plans to major purchases. But this felt different. This felt like a line being drawn in the sand. I walked over to the kitchen window and looked out at the neighborhood I'd grown to love. Maple Street was full of split-level homes built in the 70s, with mature trees and the kind of neighbors who still waved when they saw you working in the yard. I'd replaced half the windows on this street, fixed countless leaky faucets, and rewired more electrical panels than I could count. This was my home. My grandfather had left it to me specifically because he knew I'd take care of it. And now Jennifer wanted to hand over a key to the one person who'd spent years making it clear she thought I didn't deserve to be here. I was still standing at the window when I heard Jennifer's phone buzz upstairs, followed by the low murmur of another conversation. She was talking to someone, her voice too quiet for me to make out the words, but animated in a way it hadn't been with me in months. That's when I made my first mistake. Or maybe it was my first smart move. I'm still not sure which. I walked upstairs and stood outside our bedroom door listening. "Don't worry about David," Jennifer was saying. "He'll complain for a few days, then he'll get over it. He always does." There was a pause. "No, I told you, he doesn't suspect anything. He's too busy with his little projects to pay attention to what's really going on." Another pause, longer this time. "Trust me, Mom. Once you're living here, we'll have all the leverage we need. He's not going to risk making a scene with you in the house." I stood there for what felt like an hour, but was probably only a few minutes, listening to my wife discuss me like I was some kind of obstacle to be managed. When the conversation finally ended, I slipped back downstairs and sat at the kitchen table, staring at the pile of mail Jennifer had left there. Bills mostly. Credit card statements that seemed to get thicker every month, a notice from the bank about our home equity line of credit, and underneath it all, a business card I'd never seen before. Dr. Patricia Salinger, licensed marriage and family therapist. I picked up the card and turned it over. On the back, in Jennifer's handwriting, Tuesday, 3rd p.m. So she was seeing a therapist, without telling me, while planning to move her mother into our house, also without telling me. I sat there until well after midnight, turning that business card over in my hands and thinking about the conversation I'd overheard. Once you're living here, we'll have all the leverage we need. Leverage for what? By the time I finally went to bed, Jennifer was asleep, or pretending to be. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening to her breathe, and wondering when exactly my wife had started treating our marriage like a chess game. The next morning, I was up at 6, same as always. Jennifer was already gone, another new habit. She used to sleep until 7:30, but lately she'd been leaving the house before I even got out of the shower. I made coffee and sat on the back porch, looking out at the yard I'd spent 3 summers landscaping. The sprinkler system I'd installed was already running, sending arcs of water across the grass in the early morning light. At exactly 9 o'clock, a taxi pulled into our driveway. Vanna stepped out like she was arriving at a hotel, directing the driver to be careful with her luggage. She was 62, with the kind of silver hair that cost more to maintain than most people spent on groceries. Even at 9 in the morning, she was wearing a full face of makeup and jewelry that caught the sunlight. "David," she said, walking up to the porch with a smile that never quite reached her eyes. "I hope Jennifer told you I'd be staying for a while." "She mentioned it," I said. "Good. I'd hate for this to be awkward." I watched her direct the taxi driver to bring her suitcases to the front door. 3 large bags and a trunk. For someone who was supposedly between apartments, she sure had packed like she was planning an extended stay. "Where should I put these?" the driver asked. Vanna looked at me expectantly. "The guest room upstairs," I said. "First door on the right." As the driver hauled her luggage inside, Vanna settled into the porch chair next to mine without being invited. "You know, David, I've always admired what you've done with this place. Your grandfather would be proud." It was a nice thing to say, which immediately made me suspicious. Vanna didn't do nice without an agenda. "Thanks," I said. "Of course, houses like this require constant attention, don't they? So much can go wrong when you're not paying close attention." There it was, the agenda. "I stay pretty busy," I agreed. "I'm sure you do. Jennifer tells me business has been good." "Can't complain." Vanna nodded, then reached into her purse and pulled out a small prescription bottle. She shook out 2 pills and dry swallowed them without explanation. "Health issues?" I asked, trying to be polite. "Oh, just the usual things that come with getting older. Nothing serious, thank goodness." The taxi driver finished with the luggage and Vanna paid him, adding what looked like a generous tip. As he drove away, she turned back to me with that same artificial smile. Well, I suppose I should get settled in. Jennifer said she'd be home early today to help me organize everything. Great, I said. Vanna stood up and smoothed her skirt. David, I want you to know how much I appreciate this. I know having your mother-in-law move in isn't every man's dream scenario. We're family, I said, which was true but felt like swallowing glass. Yes, we are, and family takes care of each other, don't they? After she went inside, I sat on the porch for another hour, drinking coffee and watching the neighbors go about their morning routines. Mrs. Patterson from across the street waved as she retrieved her newspaper. Bob Jenkins next door was already working in his garden, probably getting ready to complain about something later. Everything looked normal, peaceful even. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was sitting in the calm before a very big storm. The first week with Vanna in the house felt like living with a polite but persistent headache. She was up early every morning, making elaborate breakfasts that Jennifer praised but barely touched. She reorganized the kitchen cabinets to be more efficient. She offered helpful suggestions about home improvement projects I should tackle next. And she watched everything. I'd catch her looking out the front window when I loaded tools into my truck. She'd appear in whatever room I was working in, claiming she was just passing through. When I took phone calls for work, she'd find reasons to be nearby, organizing something or cleaning surfaces that were already clean. She's just trying to be helpful, Jennifer said when I mentioned it. You're being paranoid. Maybe I was. But paranoia is an occupational hazard when you work in people's homes all day. You learn to notice when something doesn't feel right. The second week, I started noticing other things. Jennifer's schedule became even more erratic. She'd leave early for client meetings and come home late from networking events. When I asked about her day, her answers were vague and rehearsed. How was the Henderson deposition? I'd ask. Fine, routine. You know how these things go. But I didn't know how these things went because Jennifer had stopped talking to me about work months ago. She used to come home full of stories about difficult clients and office drama. Now she treated her job like classified information. Meanwhile, Vanna settled into our house like she'd been planning the layout for years. She claimed the guest bathroom as her own, filling it with expensive lotions and medications. She took over the living room in the evenings, watching shows that Jennifer suddenly seemed very interested in discussing. They'd sit together on the couch, talking in low voices while I worked on projects in the garage or caught up on paperwork in the kitchen. Sometimes their conversations would stop abruptly when I walked through the room, resuming only after I'd passed. It was during the third week that I found the phone. I was replacing a loose outlet in the guest room while Vanna was out grocery shopping. As I worked behind the dresser, my hand brushed against something small and rectangular taped to the back of the furniture. A cell phone. Not Jennifer's regular phone. I knew that one. This was a basic model, the kind you buy with cash and prepaid minutes. I stared at it for a long time, weighing my options. Looking through someone else's phone was a violation of privacy. But then again, hiding a secret phone in my house felt like a violation of something too. I turned it on. The text message history made my stomach drop. Yoga class was amazing today. Wish you could have been there. Thinking about you. Can't wait for tonight. David's working late again. Perfect timing. The messages went back 3 months. 3 months of my wife conducting an affair while I rewired the kitchen and installed new bathroom fixtures, completely oblivious to what was happening in my own home. The contact was listed simply as B. I scrolled through more messages, each one feeling like a punch to the gut. Jennifer wasn't just cheating, she was planning, coordinating schedules, making sure I'd be out of the house at specific times. Mom thinks we should wait until she's more settled in before making any big moves. She's right. We need to be strategic about this. David's so clueless. Sometimes I feel bad about how easy this is. Don't feel bad. You deserve to be happy. We both do. I sat on the floor of my guest room, holding my wife's secret phone, and felt something fundamental shift inside my chest. It wasn't anger exactly. It was more like the moment when you're working on a complicated repair and suddenly understand exactly what's wrong and how to fix it. I took pictures of the most damning messages with my own phone, then carefully replaced the burner exactly where I'd found it. That evening, Jennifer came home at her usual time, around 8:30. She kissed my cheek, a gesture that now felt like performance art, and asked about my day. "Good," I said. Fixed the Henderson's water heater and started the electrical work at the Morrison place. "That's nice," she said, already moving toward the living room where Vanna was waiting with dinner. I watched them eat together, chatting about Jennifer's day at work and Vanna's afternoon activities. They looked like a mother and daughter catching up, completely normal except for the fact that I now knew they were co-conspirators in the systematic destruction of my marriage. "David, you're quiet tonight," Vanna observed. "Everything all right?" "Just tired," I said. "Long day." "You work so hard," Jennifer said with what sounded like genuine sympathy. "Maybe you should take a day off this weekend. We could do something together." I wondered if that included her yoga instructor. After dinner, I went to my workshop in the garage and tried to focus on rebuilding a carburetor for Mrs. Chen's old lawnmower. But my hands were shaking, and I kept making mistakes that would normally be automatic. I needed advice. More than that, I needed someone to tell me I wasn't losing my mind. The next morning, I called my attorney. Robert Brennan had handled my grandfather's estate and helped me set up my business. He was in his 60s, with the kind of no-nonsense attitude that comes from dealing with people's problems for 40 years. "David," he said when I walked into his office, "what can I do for you?" "I need to ask you about my house. Specifically, about who can live there." Robert leaned back in his chair. "This about your mother-in-law moving in? Jennifer mentioned that when she called last week." "Jennifer called you?" "She had some questions about property rights. Wanted to know about spousal ownership, that sort of thing?" Robert's expression grew more serious. "David, is there something I should know about?" I told him about finding the phone, about the messages, about the feeling that I was being maneuvered into something I didn't understand. Robert listened without interrupting, making notes on a legal pad. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "David, I need to tell you something about your grandfather's will that might be relevant." He pulled out a thick file and flipped through several pages. "The house comes with what's called a restrictive covenant. Your grandfather was very specific about who could live there permanently. The property is held in trust, with you as the primary beneficiary, but there are conditions." "What kind of conditions?" "Relatives by marriage or association may not establish permanent residence without your explicit written approval. And even then, you keep the right to withdraw that approval at any time." I stared at him. "Are you saying I can legally kick Vanna out?" "I'm saying your grandfather specifically designed the trust to prevent exactly this situation. He was worried about someone trying to use marriage or family relationships to gain control of the property." Robert flipped to another page. "There's more. If you discover that someone is living there in violation of the covenant, you have 1 year from the date of discovery to enforce it. After that, the violation becomes legally acceptable through adverse possession principles. And if I don't enforce it, then you lose the right to object, and they can potentially claim legal residence. Given that your wife has been asking about spousal property rights." Robert didn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. I felt like I'd been holding my breath for weeks and could finally exhale. "What do I need to do?" "First, we document everything. The messages, the timeline, any evidence of planning or coordination. Then we serve notice that Vanna's residence violates the trust covenant and she has 30 days to vacate. And if she refuses? Then we go to court, and based on what you've told me, we'll win." "But David," Robert leaned forward, This is going to get ugly. Jennifer's not going to take this well, and neither is her mother. Are you prepared for that? I thought about the messages on that hidden phone, about 3 months of lies and manipulation, about sitting in my own kitchen while my wife and her mother discussed me like I was some kind of problem to be solved. Yeah, I said, I'm prepared. That afternoon, I drove home with a folder full of legal documents and a plan that felt like the first thing I'd controlled in months. Jennifer's car was in the driveway, which was unusual for a Thursday afternoon. I walked into the house and found her in the kitchen with Vanna, both of them looking up from what appeared to be a serious conversation. David, Jennifer said, and something in her voice was different. We need to talk. About what? About us. About our marriage. About whether this is really working anymore. I looked at Vanna, who was watching this exchange with the kind of interest people usually reserved for sporting events. Okay, I said. Let's talk. Jennifer glanced at her mother, who nodded encouragingly. I think we should consider a trial separation, Jennifer said, just to give us both some space to figure out what we really want. And where exactly would I go during this trial separation? Well, you have options. You could stay with your sister, or maybe rent a small apartment somewhere. I almost laughed. The audacity was breathtaking. So let me get this straight, I said. You want me to move out of the house I inherited from my grandfather, so you and your mother can have space to figure out what you want. It's not about the house, David. It's about our relationship. Right. Our relationship. I looked at Vanna, who was doing her best to appear sympathetic. And how long have you two been planning this conversation? We haven't been planning anything, Jennifer said, but her voice had that rehearsed quality again. I've just been doing a lot of thinking lately. I bet you have. Something in my tone must have warned her, because Jennifer's expression shifted from practiced sympathy to genuine wariness. What's that supposed to mean? I pulled out the folder Robert had given me and set it on the kitchen table. It means I've been doing some thinking too, about property rights, about trust covenants, about who actually gets to decide who lives in this house. I opened the folder and showed them the first document. Turns out my grandfather was a pretty smart guy. He made sure that nobody could use family relationships to take control of his property. Vanna, you've been living here in violation of a legal covenant. You have 30 days to find somewhere else to stay. The silence that followed was so complete, I could hear the refrigerator humming in the background. Vanna was the first to speak. David, surely we can discuss this reasonably. We are discussing it reasonably. I'm giving you 30 days' notice, which is more than the law requires. Jennifer's face had gone pale. You can't be serious. I'm completely serious. This is my home too. Yes, it is, but it's not your mother's home, and according to my grandfather's will, it never can be without my written permission. I closed the folder and looked at both of them. So here's what's going to happen. Vanna is going to find somewhere else to live. And Jennifer, if you want to have a conversation about our marriage, we can do that. But we're going to have it honestly, without an audience, and without any more games. I walked toward the stairs, then paused. Oh, and Jennifer? Next time you want to discuss property rights with my attorney, you might want to include me in the conversation. As I headed upstairs, I heard Vanna whisper something urgent to Jennifer, but I couldn't make out the words. I didn't need to. I was finally starting to understand the game they'd been playing. Now it was my turn to make a move. The next morning, I woke up to find Jennifer's side of the bed empty and cold. She'd either left very early or never come home at all. Vanna was in the kitchen, making coffee with the kind of deliberate calm that suggested she'd been waiting for me. Good morning, David, she said without turning around. Jennifer had to leave early for work, some kind of emergency at the office. I'm sure she did. Vanna poured herself a cup of coffee and sat at the kitchen table, gesturing for me to join her. When I remained standing, she sighed. David, I think we got off on the wrong foot yesterday. I understand you're upset about the living situation, but surely we can work something out that makes everyone happy. What did you have in mind? Well, I could contribute to household expenses, help with utilities, groceries, that sort of thing. I know having an extra person in the house creates additional costs. I studied her face, looking for the angle. With Vanna, there was always an angle. How much are we talking about? I could manage $300 a month, maybe $400 if necessary. $300 to violate a legal covenant that protected my inheritance. It would have been insulting if it weren't so revealing. That's generous, I said. But the answer is still no. Vanna's composure cracked slightly. David, you're being unreasonable. I'm family. No, Vanna, you're Jennifer's family. There's a difference. I grabbed my work bag and headed for the door. As I reached for the handle, Vanna's voice stopped me. You know, David, Jennifer's been very unhappy lately. I turned around. Is that right? She feels like you don't appreciate her, like you take her for granted. And you think having her mother move in will fix that? Vanna smiled, and for the first time since she'd arrived, it looked genuine. I think Jennifer deserves better than a man who threatens to throw his wife's mother out on the street. There it was. The real conversation we'd been dancing around. Good thing I'm only throwing out his wife's mother then. I left her sitting at my kitchen table and drove to my first job of the day, replacing a water heater for the Kowalski family. It was routine work, the kind of repair I could do in my sleep, which gave me plenty of time to think. Vanna's offer to pay rent wasn't about money, it was about establishing legal residence. If she started paying to live there, she could argue that she was a tenant rather than a guest, which would complicate the eviction process. But more than that, her comment about Jennifer deserving better felt like a threat, or maybe a preview of coming attractions. I was connecting the new water heater when my phone rang. David? This is Dr. Patricia Salinger. The name took me a second to place. Then I remembered the business card I'd found in our mail. Dr. Salinger, what can I do for you? I'm calling because Jennifer mentioned you might be interested in couples counseling. I have an opening this afternoon if you'd like to come in. Jennifer mentioned that? She seemed to think you'd both benefit from having a neutral space to discuss some ongoing issues. I almost said no automatically. The last thing I wanted was to sit in some therapist's office while Jennifer performed her victim routine for a professional audience. But then I had a different thought. Dr. Salinger, do you record your sessions? I can, with the explicit consent of both parties. Some couples find it helpful to review their conversations later. I'd like that, I said. If we're going to do this, I want everything documented. There was a pause. That's unusual, but certainly doable. Can you be here at 4? I'll be there. I spent the rest of the day thinking about what I wanted to say and, more importantly, what I wanted Jennifer to say. If she was planning to use therapy as part of her strategy, I might as well use it as part of mine. Dr. Salinger's office was in a converted house near downtown, with the kind of aggressively calming decor that was supposed to put people at ease. Jennifer was already there when I arrived, sitting in one of 2 chairs arranged across from the therapist's desk. David, Dr. Salinger said, standing to shake my hand. Thank you for coming. As I mentioned on the phone, I can record this session if you both consent. I consent, I said. Jennifer looked surprised. You want to record this? I think it's a good idea. That way we can both review what we talked about later, make sure we're remembering things correctly. Okay, I guess that's fine. Dr. Salinger set up a digital recorder in the center of the room and pressed record. This is Dr. Patricia Salinger, Session 1 with David and Jennifer Marlen, recorded with full consent of both parties. Today's date is October 15th. Jennifer, you called to set up this appointment. Would you like to start by telling me what brought you here? Jennifer shifted in her chair and launched into what sounded like a prepared speech about communication problems and growing apart and feeling unheard in the relationship. David works all the time, she said. He's completely focused on his business, and his projects around the house. I feel like I'm living with a roommate who occasionally remembers he has a wife. Dr. Salinger made notes and asked follow-up questions. How long had Jennifer been feeling this way? When had she first noticed these problems? What had she done to address them? I've tried talking to him about it, but he doesn't listen. He just gets defensive or changes the subject. David, how do you respond to that? I looked at Jennifer, sitting there with her practiced expression of patient suffering. I think Jennifer's right that we have communication problems, I said. But I think they're different than what she's describing. How so? Well, for example, Jennifer made a major decision about our living situation without consulting me. Her mother moved into our house, and I found out about it the night before it happened. Jennifer's jaw tightened. My mother needed help. I wasn't going to let her become homeless while we scheduled a committee meeting about it. But you did schedule meetings about it, Jennifer, just not with me. Dr. Salinger looked between us. David, can you elaborate on that? Jennifer's been planning this for months. She's been discussing strategy with her mother about how to handle my objections. She told her mother I was too busy with my projects to pay attention to what's really going on. That's not... Jennifer started, then stopped. That's not what? I asked. I never said you were too busy to pay attention. You said I was too busy with my little projects to pay attention to what's really going on. Those were your exact words. Jennifer stared at me. How could you possibly know my exact words? Because I heard you say them. The room went quiet, except for the hum of the digital recorder. Dr. Salinger cleared her throat. Jennifer, how do you feel about David overhearing your private conversations? Violated, Jennifer said immediately. If David is eavesdropping on my phone calls, that explains a lot about why our marriage is falling apart. Is that what happened, David? Were you eavesdropping? I was standing outside our bedroom door in our house, and Jennifer was talking loudly enough that I could hear her through the door. If she wanted privacy, she could have closed the door or lowered her voice. But you chose to listen rather than walk away, Dr. Salinger observed. Yes, I did. Because my wife was making major decisions about our life together, and apparently the only way to find out about them was to listen to her discuss them with other people. Jennifer leaned forward. David, if you had concerns about my mother staying with us, you could have talked to me directly. When? You leave the house before I wake up and come home after 8. When exactly should I have brought this up? You could have called me at work? Could I? Because when I ask about your day at work, you give me one-word answers. When I ask about your schedule, you're vague about where you're going and when you'll be back. You've turned our marriage into a guessing game, Jennifer. Dr. Salinger was writing furiously. It sounds like you both feel shut out of each other's lives. I don't feel shut out, I said. I am shut out. Jennifer has made it clear that I'm not a partner in decisions about our life together. I'm just someone who pays the bills and maintains the house while she does whatever she wants. That's not fair, Jennifer said, and for the first time, she sounded genuinely upset rather than strategically hurt. I work just as hard as you do. I'm not talking about work, Jennifer. I'm talking about honesty. What's that supposed to mean? This was the moment I'd been building toward, the moment that would either save our marriage or end it. It means I know about the yoga classes. The color drained from Jennifer's face. I know about the late nights that aren't really work. I know about the networking events that don't exist, and I know about the phone you have hidden in the guest room. Jennifer looked like she was going to be sick. Dr. Salinger set down her pen. David, are you saying you believe Jennifer is having an affair? I'm not saying I believe it. I'm saying I know it. I've seen the text messages. The silence stretched so long I could hear traffic outside the building. Finally, Jennifer spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. How long have you known? Long enough. David, Dr. Salinger said carefully, how are you feeling right now? I thought about the question seriously. How was I feeling? Relieved, I said finally. For months, I've been wondering what I did wrong. Why my wife stopped talking to me, stopped including me in decisions, stopped acting like we were married. Now I know it's not because I work too much or don't pay enough attention. It's because she's been planning to leave me and wanted to make sure she had all her pieces in place first. Jennifer was crying now, but quietly, like she didn't want to draw attention to it. "Jennifer," Dr. Salinger said gently, "is David's assessment accurate?" Jennifer nodded without looking up. "Can you tell me about that?" "I met someone," Jennifer said to her hands. "At yoga class. It wasn't supposed to happen, but it did, and I didn't know how to handle it." "So you decided to handle it by moving your mother into our house and trying to get me to move out," I said. Jennifer looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. "It wasn't like that." "Then what was it like?" I was confused. I didn't know what I wanted. Mom said I needed to be practical, make sure I was protected financially before I made any big decisions. Protected from what? From losing everything if we got divorced. I felt something cold settle in my chest. So this was never about your mother needing help. This was about positioning yourself for a divorce. "David, please. And the therapy? Was this part of the plan too? Get me on record being unreasonable so you could use it in court?" Dr. Salinger held up a hand. "David, I understand you're angry, but let's try to stay focused on communication rather than accusations." "These aren't accusations, Dr. Salinger. They're facts. Jennifer has been planning to end our marriage for months, and every conversation we've had during that time has been a lie." I stood up. "Jennifer, I want you and your mother out of my house by the end of the week." "David, wait. No, we're done here. Dr. Salinger, thank you for recording this session. I'll be in touch about getting a copy of the audio." I walked out of the office and sat in my truck for 10 minutes, waiting for my hands to stop shaking. Through the window, I could see Jennifer still sitting in the therapist's office, crying. Part of me wanted to go back inside, to try to salvage something from 8 years of marriage, to find a way to forgive and move forward. But a bigger part of me was already thinking about what came next. Jennifer had been planning and strategizing for months. She'd involved her mother, her lover, and now a therapist in her scheme to end our marriage on terms that benefited her. Well, two could play that game, and I was just getting started. I drove home to find Vanna waiting in the living room with 2 suitcases by the door. She looked up when I walked in, her expression a mixture of defiance and calculation. "I assume Jennifer called you," I said. "She's very upset, David. She says you accused her of terrible things." "I didn't accuse her of anything. I stated facts." Vanna stood up, smoothing her skirt in that gesture I'd come to recognize as her preparation for battle. "David, I want you to know that whatever problems you and Jennifer are having, I had nothing to do with encouraging them." I stared at her. Even now, caught red-handed, she was still lying. "Vanna, I heard you tell Jennifer that once you were living here, you'd have all the leverage you needed. I heard you tell her to be strategic about timing. You've been planning this whole thing from the beginning. That's not—" "Stop." I held up a hand. "Just stop. I'm tired of being lied to by people who think I'm too stupid to figure out what's going on." Vanna's mask finally slipped, and I saw something cold and calculating underneath. "Fine," she said. "You want honesty? Here's honesty. Jennifer deserves better than a man who thinks changing light bulbs and fixing leaky faucets makes him some kind of provider. She's educated, sophisticated, ambitious. She could have married a lawyer or a doctor, but instead she settled for a handyman who can't even see when his wife is unhappy. And you thought the solution was to help her cheat? I thought the solution was to help her realize she had options, that she didn't have to spend the rest of her life pretending to be grateful for a house her husband inherited and a lifestyle that barely qualifies as middle class. There it was, the real Vanna Hesslor without the performance. "Well, congratulations," I said. "Mission accomplished. Jennifer realized she had options, and now she's exercising them." I picked up one of her suitcases. "Let me help you with these. David, Wait, we don't have to be enemies. I know you're hurt, but this could work out well for everyone. Jennifer could be happy, you could find someone more compatible, and we could all move forward without destroying each other. Move forward how? With you living in my house? I could be helpful to you during the transition, someone to manage the household while you figure out what comes next. I almost laughed. Vanna, you're not listening. There is no transition. There is no negotiation. You're leaving today, and Jennifer can decide whether she wants to leave with you or stay and work on our marriage honestly. And if she chooses to leave, then she leaves. But she doesn't get to have it both ways anymore. I carried her suitcases to the front porch and set them down. When I turned around, Vanna was standing in the doorway, her face flushed with anger. You're making a mistake, David. Jennifer has friends, connections, resources you don't even know about. If you force her hand like this, you're going to regret it. Is that a threat? It's a reality check. You think because you own this house, you hold all the cards, but property is just one part of a divorce settlement. There's also income, assets, future earning potential. Jennifer's been very smart about documenting your behavior, your limitations, your inability to meet her needs. What behavior? Vanna smiled, and it was genuinely unpleasant. The anger issues, for one, the controlling tendencies, the way you eavesdrop on private conversations and go through other people's belongings. I felt something click into place. You wanted me to find that phone. I have no idea what you're talking about. You taped it to the back of the dresser in the guest room where I'd be likely to find it while doing electrical work. You wanted me to see those messages. Vanna's silence was confirmation enough. Why? Because Jennifer needed to see who you really are when you're angry. She needed evidence of the kind of man she married. So this whole thing was a setup. The affair, moving in here, the therapy session, all of it designed to make me look bad. It was designed to give Jennifer options and protect her future. I stared at this woman who had spent weeks eating my food, sleeping in my house, and plotting my destruction with a level of calculation that was almost impressive. Well, Vanna, I hope it was worth it, because now I know exactly who I'm dealing with. I went back inside and closed the door, leaving her on the porch with her luggage. Through the window, I watched her make a phone call, probably to Jennifer, or maybe to a taxi company. 20 minutes later, a car pulled up, and Vanna loaded her bags. She didn't knock on the door or try to say goodbye. She just left. I sat in my empty house and tried to figure out what I was feeling. Anger, certainly, but also something like relief. For the first time in months, I felt like I could think clearly. My phone rang. Jennifer. David, please don't hang up. I'm listening. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry about all of this. I never wanted it to happen this way. What way did you want it to happen? I don't know. I was confused and scared, and I let my mother convince me that I needed to protect myself. Protect yourself from what, Jennifer? From me? From being left with nothing if our marriage ended. Our marriage was ending. There was a long pause. I thought it might be. We've been so distant lately, and I thought maybe you were unhappy too. So instead of talking to me about it, you decided to have an affair and move your mother in to help you strategize a divorce. It sounds terrible when you say it like that. How does it sound when you say it? Another pause, like I made a huge mistake. I walked to the kitchen window and looked out at the backyard I'd spent so much time perfecting. The sprinkler system was running, sending water across the grass in neat, predictable patterns. Jennifer, I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth. Okay. Do you love him? The yoga instructor? I thought I did. I don't know anymore. That's not an answer. David, I'm so confused right now. Everything happened so fast, and now it's all falling apart, and I don't know what I want. Well, here's what I want, I said. I want you to come home. I want you to end whatever you have with this guy. I want you to be honest with me about everything, the affair, the planning, all of it. And I want us to try to fix this marriage for real, not as some kind of strategic move. And if I can't do that, then we get divorced, and we do it honestly, without games or manipulation or trying to destroy each other. David, those are your options, Jennifer. Come home and work on our marriage, or file for divorce, and we'll divide everything fairly. But the scheming stops now. Can I have some time to think about it? You can have until tomorrow. After that, I'm assuming you've made your choice. I hung up and spent the evening in my workshop, organizing tools and trying not to think about the conversation. But as I worked, I found myself planning. If Jennifer chose to come home, we'd need rules, boundaries, complete transparency about everything that had happened and everything that would happen going forward. And if she chose divorce, well, I'd learned a lot about strategy over the past few weeks. Vanna had been right about one thing. I'd been underestimating what Jennifer was capable of. I wouldn't make that mistake again. The next morning, Jennifer's car was in the driveway when I woke up. She was sitting at the kitchen table, still wearing yesterday's clothes, looking like she hadn't slept. I ended it, she said without looking up. I called him last night and told him it was over. Okay. And I told my mother she was wrong about you, about us. I told her I wanted to try to save our marriage. What did she say? Jennifer finally looked at me, and her eyes were red-rimmed and exhausted. She said I was making the biggest mistake of my life, that you'd never forgive me, and I'd end up with nothing. What do you think? I think I've already lost the most important thing. The question is whether there's any way to get it back. I poured myself coffee and sat across from her at the table where we'd eaten breakfast together for 8 years. Jennifer, I need to understand something. Was any of it real? The marriage, the life we built together, was I the only one who thought it meant something? No. Her voice was barely a whisper. It was real. It was the most real thing in my life for a long time. But somewhere along the way, I started taking it for granted. I started thinking I deserved more, or different, or I don't even know what. And your mother encouraged that. She encouraged me to think about what I wanted from life, whether I was settling, whether I was happy. Were you happy? Jennifer was quiet for so long, I thought she wasn't going to answer. I thought I wasn't, she said finally. But I think I confused being happy with being excited. Our life together was stable, comfortable, predictable. The affair was exciting. It made me feel like I was someone different, someone more interesting. And now? Now I realize that stable and comfortable and predictable aren't bad things. They're rare things, and I threw them away for excitement that lasted about 5 minutes once it became real. I studied her face, looking for signs of manipulation or performance. But Jennifer looked genuinely broken, like someone who had made a terrible mistake and was just beginning to understand the consequences. So, what do you want to do? I asked. I want to fix this, if it's possible, if you can forgive me. Jennifer, forgiveness isn't the issue. Trust is the issue. You spent months lying to me, planning behind my back, setting up scenarios designed to make me look bad. How do I know this isn't just another strategy? You don't, she said simply. You have to decide whether you want to take that risk. We sat there in silence, drinking coffee in the kitchen where this whole mess had started. Outside, I could hear the neighbors starting their day, car doors slamming, dogs barking, the ordinary sounds of people going about their lives. If we do this, I said finally, there have to be rules. Okay. Complete honesty about everything. No more secret phones, no more mysterious schedule changes, no more conversations with your mother about our marriage. Agreed. And we do real counseling. Not the kind where you're trying to build a case against me, but the kind where we actually try to understand what went wrong and how to fix it. Yes. And Jennifer? I looked directly at her. If you change your mind, If you decide you want out after all, you tell me straight. No more games. I promise. I wanted to believe her. Part of me did believe her. But another part of me, the part that had learned to notice when something didn't feel right, was still watching and waiting. Because Vanna had been right about one thing. I'd been underestimating what the people in my life were capable of. I wouldn't make that mistake again. 3 weeks later, I was beginning to think we might actually make it work. Jennifer had been true to her word about transparency. She'd given me passwords to her email and social media accounts. She'd introduced me to her co-workers and included me in office social events. She'd even started coming home for lunch some days just to check in and spend time together. We were seeing Dr. Salinger twice a week, and the sessions felt different now. Productive. Like we were actually trying to understand each other instead of scoring points. But I should have known it was too easy. The first sign of trouble came on a Thursday morning when I was replacing a garbage disposal for the Martinez family. My phone rang, and the caller ID showed my attorney's office. "David, we need to talk," Robert said without preamble. "Can you come in this afternoon?" "What's wrong?" "I'd rather discuss it in person. How's 3 o'clock?" I finished the job and drove to Robert's office with a growing sense of unease. He was waiting with a thick folder and an expression I'd learned to associate with bad news. "David, I've been doing some research on your wife's financial situation, just as a precaution given everything that's happened." "And?" "She's been busy. Very busy." He opened the folder and spread several documents across his desk. Credit applications, loan documents, financial statements, all filed within the last 6 months. I picked up one of the papers. It was an application for a home equity line of credit, with both my signature and Jennifer's. Except I'd never seen the document before. "Robert, I didn't sign this." "I was afraid you were going to say that." He handed me another document. "How about this one?" It was a loan application for $40,000, again with both our signatures. Again, I'd never seen it before. "Or this one." Another loan, this one for $60,000. I stared at the papers, feeling like the floor was shifting under my feet. "How is this possible?" "Someone's been forging your signature, and they're good at it. These look very convincing." "How much are we talking about total?" Robert consulted his notes. $240,000 across 7 different loans and credit lines, all secured against your house. I felt sick. When were these filed? The earliest one is from 6 months ago. The most recent was submitted last week. Last week. While Jennifer was promising complete honesty and transparency, she was still filing fraudulent loan applications using my forged signature. "David, there's more." Robert's voice was gentle, like he was delivering a terminal diagnosis. "I also found records of several large cash withdrawals and wire transfers. It looks like most of the money has already been moved offshore." "To where?" "The Cayman Islands, an account in Jennifer's name." I sat back in my chair, trying to process what I was hearing. While I'd been working on our marriage, Jennifer had been systematically stealing from me. "What are my options?" "We file criminal charges for fraud and forgery. We freeze the offshore account. We try to recover as much of the money as possible." Robert paused. "But David, you need to understand. This level of financial fraud suggests a very sophisticated operation. Jennifer didn't do this alone." "Vanna." "That would be my guess. This has her fingerprints all over it." I drove home in a daze, trying to figure out how I'd been so completely fooled. Jennifer's car was in the driveway, and I could see her through the kitchen window, making dinner like it was just another normal evening. I sat in my truck for 10 minutes, watching my wife move around our kitchen, and felt something fundamental change inside me. It wasn't anger, exactly. It was more like a switch being flipped, transforming me from someone who wanted to save his marriage into someone who wanted justice. I walked into the house and found Jennifer setting the table for 2. "Perfect timing," she said, smiling. I made that pasta dish you like. Jennifer, we need to talk. Something in my voice must have warned her, because her smile faltered. What's wrong? I pulled out the loan documents and spread them on the table, right next to the dinner plates. I had an interesting conversation with my attorney today. Jennifer stared at the papers, her face going pale. David, I can explain. Can you? Because I'm very interested to hear how you explain forging my signature on loan applications while promising me complete honesty. It's not what it looks like. It looks like fraud. Multiple counts of fraud, totaling nearly $250,000. Jennifer sank into a chair, her hands shaking. David, please let me explain. I'm listening. The money, it was for us, for our future. I was trying to secure our financial position in case something happened to your business. By stealing from me? By protecting assets that belong to both of us. I stared at her, amazed by her ability to reframe theft as financial planning. Jennifer, you moved the money to an offshore account in your name only. How exactly does that protect assets that belong to both of us? I was going to tell you about it. I just wanted to make sure everything was set up properly first. When? When were you going to tell me? Soon. I just needed more time to figure out how to explain it. The way you needed time to figure out how to explain the affair? Jennifer started crying, but this time it felt different, calculated, like she was trying to buy time to think of a better story. David, I know this looks bad, but you have to believe me. I never meant to hurt you. Everything I did was because I love you and I wanted to protect our future together. By committing felonies. By being practical. You're so trusting, so naive about financial matters. I was trying to make sure we'd be secure. I picked up one of the loan documents and studied the forged signature. It was remarkably good. Someone had practiced. Who helped you with this, Jennifer? No one. I did it myself. You learned to forge signatures well enough to fool multiple banks all by yourself? I looked it up online. There are tutorials. I almost laughed. Even caught red-handed, she was still lying. Jennifer, I know your mother was involved in this. The question is whether you're going to keep lying about it or start telling the truth. My mother has nothing to do with this. Really? Because this level of financial fraud requires expertise that neither of us has. Someone who understands offshore banking, document forgery, loan applications, someone with experience in financial manipulation. Jennifer's tears stopped abruptly. What are you saying? I'm saying your mother has been running cons for years, and you've been her latest accomplice. That's ridiculous. I pulled out my phone and showed her a document Robert had found during his research. Vanna, arrested in 2018 for insurance fraud. Charges dropped due to insufficient evidence. Vanna, investigated in 2019 for Medicare fraud. No charges filed. Vanna, sued in 2020 for financial elder abuse. Case settled out of court. Jennifer stared at the phone screen, her face going from pale to gray. Your mother is a professional con artist, Jennifer, and you helped her target me. No, that's not. She wouldn't what? Wouldn't use her own daughter to steal from her son-in-law? Because that's exactly what happened. I sat down across from her at the table, pushing the dinner plates aside to make room for more documents. Here's what I think happened. Your mother identified me as a target months ago. Stable income, valuable property, trusting personality. She convinced you to have an affair to destabilize the marriage, then moved in to execute the financial fraud. The affair was never about you being unhappy. It was about creating chaos, so I wouldn't notice the money disappearing. David, that's crazy. Is it? Because it explains everything. Why your mother was so eager to move in. Why she wanted me to find that phone. Why she kept pushing you to be strategic about timing. She needed me angry and distracted while she looted our accounts. Jennifer was shaking her head, but I could see doubt creeping into her expression. The reconciliation was part of it too. I continued. Keep me focused on saving the marriage while the final loans were processed. Make me think everything was getting better while your mother finished stealing everything we had. Stop it. Jennifer, where is your mother right now? I don't know. She's been staying with a friend. What friend? Someone from her church. What church? Jennifer stared at me, unable to answer. You don't know where she is, do you? Because she's gone. Probably left the country as soon as the last wire transfer went through. I pulled out another document. Flight records, Jennifer. Your mother flew to Grand Cayman 3 days ago. One-way ticket. Jennifer looked like she was going to be sick. She left you holding the bag, I said quietly. You're the one whose name is on the loan applications. You're the one who'll face criminal charges when I report this fraud. Your mother is sitting on a beach somewhere with our money, and you're here trying to convince me it was all for our future together. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Finally, Jennifer spoke, her voice barely audible. She said it would be temporary. She said we'd pay everything back once the investments matured. What investments? She had a business opportunity, something about real estate development in Central America. She said we could triple the money within a year. I closed my eyes and rubbed my temples. Jennifer, there are no investments. There's no business opportunity. Your mother stole our money and fled the country, leaving you to face the consequences. But she promised, she lied, about everything. The same way you've been lying to me. Jennifer broke down completely then, sobbing with the kind of desperation that comes from finally understanding how badly you've been played. I watched her cry and felt nothing. No sympathy, no anger, no desire to comfort her. Just a cold, clear understanding that my marriage was over and had been for a long time. David, she said through her tears, what happens now? Now? Now I call the police and report the fraud. I file for divorce. I try to recover what I can of the money your mother stole. And me? You'll probably be arrested. Depending on what kind of deal you make with the prosecutors, you might avoid jail time if you cooperate fully. I'll lose everything. Yes, I said. You will. I stood up and looked around the kitchen where we'd shared so many meals, so many conversations, so many ordinary moments that I'd thought added up to a life together. For what it's worth, Jennifer, I think you were as much a victim in this as I was. Your mother used you, manipulated you, and then abandoned you when things got complicated. But that doesn't change what you did. It doesn't change the fact that you chose to lie to me, steal from me, and destroy our marriage for money that was never going to benefit either of us. I walked toward the door, then paused. I'll be staying at my sister's place while the police process the scene. My attorney will be in touch about the divorce proceedings. David, wait, please. Isn't there some way we can work this out? I turned back to look at her one last time. Jennifer was sitting at our kitchen table, surrounded by evidence of her crimes, still hoping for a miracle that would let her escape the consequences of her choices. No, I said, there isn't. I walked out of the house my grandfather had left me, the house I'd spent 8 years improving and maintaining and loving. By tomorrow, it would be a crime scene. By next month, it would probably be sold to pay legal fees and restitution. But as I drove away, I realized I wasn't as devastated as I'd expected to be. Angry, yes. Betrayed, absolutely. But also, strangely, relieved. For the first time in months, I knew exactly where I stood. I knew who I was dealing with. I knew what came next. And I knew that whatever happened, I'd never again be the naive, trusting man who'd let people manipulate him while he focused on fixing their problems. Some things, once broken, can't be repaired. Sometimes the only solution is to start over completely, and sometimes